Kibo is a nonprofit organization. It's a 501c3. We were incorporated. I'll tell you some about our story here in just a few minutes. I'm on the board. I was part of the story that formed and framed Kibo, and I'll tell you that as well. We exist to partner with East Africans to help address issues of poverty, the challenges of poverty and injustice in East African communities. We exist to try to help East African communities flourish, to live well, to be happy and healthy. So here's what I'm going to try to do in 30 minutes, trying to wrap up decades of history here in a few minutes. I'm going to share Kibo through these three kind of angles, I guess you might say, three chapters of this presentation. And I'm going to do so through these three numbers. Okay? Just a kind of an attempt to tell our story concisely and creatively. And so the first one, actually not just a number, it's a date, 1998. The Kibo organization started really through a series of conversations that happened in 1998 between a group of Americans that were friends, 15 of us, I was one of them, as we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. And so we had this big mountain experience. We planned for it, we trained for it. It took us 6 days to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. If you know anything about Kilimanjaro, it's the tallest mountain in Africa. Actually the tallest freestanding mountain in the world. About 20,000 feet, just under 20,000 feet, and it rises up across the African Serengeti. And so we climbed it in 1998, and it was great fun, it was challenging, it was inspiring, we were with friends. And Mount Kilimanjaro has 3 volcanic cones, that's what makes up the mountain, and the tallest of those cones, the one with the highest peak, is called Kibo. And so Kibo, as an organization, is named after the highest volcanic crater of Mount Kilimanjaro. And so as we climbed during those 6 days, we were talking about things we were passionate about. We were sharing life together. And on the last day, we peaked at the highest peak point on the Kibo crater, which is called Uhuru Peak. It's the highest, it's the roof of Africa. And there are a lot of reasons for this, I don't have time to go into it, but you make your final ascent in the middle of the night. And so we peaked at the top of Kibo at sunrise on a Sunday morning, and we stood on top of Africa while the sun came up over the Serengeti and started to spread over the African continent, and it was just awesome. And we had this shared experience. It was breathtaking, not least because it's hard to breathe at 20,000 feet, but it was also just beautiful and inspiring. And we stood there as a group of friends, and I was going to say we sung a song. We kind of coughed out a little bit of a song with the little air that we had. And we had a moment where we had that shared experience together. But a couple things you need to know about that group to know this story. First of all, the group, the 15 that climbed, as I've already said, we were close friends. We had shared experiences. We've been together for many years. Not only did we have shared experiences, but we had a shared faith. A Christian faith that we believed called us to find creative and aggressive ways to serve our global neighbors and to love people around us and to make the world more like what God wants the world to be. And so that's the first thing about this group that climbed together. Second thing about this group that climbed together is that we all had a love for Africa. And specifically, we had a love for Uganda in East Africa. In fact, by the time we made that climb in 1998, a number of us had already lived in Uganda, East Africa for a number of years, working as missionaries, and we loved Uganda, and we loved Ugandans, and that's something that we shared together as well. And so when I talk about friendships on the story of Kibo, when I talk about the friendships behind the story of Kibo, it's not just friendships between some Americans, but close, dear Ugandan friends who we shared life with. We experienced the joys of life and the pains of life. We had attended each other's weddings and we attended each other's funerals. And we had these relationships with people that we loved in Uganda. And then the third and last thing about this group is that we were also very aware of our own blessings. And as 15 Americans climbing this mountain, we were increasingly aware of how we've been blessed monetarily and in many other ways. And again, when you go back to the faith component of this story, we all shared this conviction that the blessings we had received needed to be turned around into blessings for others. And so we shared this, shared a love for each other, shared a love for Ugandans, and shared a desire to do good in the world and to do good well in the world. And I'll come back to that distinction here in just a minute. But all of that to say, 1998 is the start of the Kibo story, and more than anything, it's a story of friendship and faith and passion for Africa and for Africans. So when you hear our mission statement that Kibo exists to address issues of poverty and injustice, that's not an abstract statement to me. You guys have been given a pamphlet, one of our brochures here. When I say the words poverty in East Africa or injustice, those aren't abstract concepts. Those aren't academic concepts to me. Those are words that have faces attached to them. And if you look on the back of that, you look at a number of people that are part of the Kibo infrastructure, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. And these people are close friends of ours. They're not employees. I could tell you about their kids. I can tell you about their grandchildren in some cases. I could tell you about shared experiences. I could tell you about ways that we've served them and ways that they've served us, ways that some of them have served me personally. And it's that kind of thing that started this. And so that's just the first number here, but if you wanted to even go forward a little bit, what started as those conversations in 1998 on the mountain eventually led to the 2004 incorporation of Kibo. So about 6 years later. And the conversations we were having on the mountain, at the time, we could not have known where it was going to lead. And I say that in part to encourage you for the kind of conversations you have with one another. When you get together with good people that you trust and that you want to do good and you start dreaming and you start talking, things happen. And sometimes you won't know for years later. But the seeds of those conversations eventually led to the organization called Kibo and its incorporation in 2004. And then I can also even point it back a little bit. And I'll just briefly say, I've already alluded to this, but not only did the conversation start there, but they went back years before that, at least 4 years before that, when a group of us moved to Uganda to begin with. And so by the time Kibo started, there were 10 years of deep, long relationships. And we learned a language, an unwritten language in East Africa called Lusoga. And we spent years in the villages working with faith communities and working in different development projects and doing different things and had all those relationships that led to this, that led to that. Last thing I'll say before going on to the next number here in our story is the other thing that we were aware of as we were climbing the mountain, and this is a really important point for understanding Kibo, is we were also aware of the complexities and the ironies of our own involvement in Africa. And what I mean by that is when we climbed the mountain, we paid a lot of money for that 5-day experience. Some of you are getting ready to go on spring break trips to different places, and you may have an awareness of this as well. We had to buy permits, we had to pay porters, we had to get ourselves to Tanzania, we did all this stuff. We paid a lot of money to have this great world experience of climbing a mountain together. And in fact, at the base of that mountain lived communities of people that would never climb that mountain, even though they looked at it their entire lives. And every day they lived not knowing if they were going to be able to put food on their children's plates. And the amount of money that we spent for that great 5-day experience was more money than many of those people that lived at the base of the mountain would see in years, as they tried to hobble together a life and take care of their children and build a life around themselves. And so we climbed with some awareness of that, and not just an awareness of the discrepancy, but I can even go further and say even an awareness, or at least a wondering, of how much that climb itself was actually contributing to some of those discrepancies. How much we were taking part in ecotourism, or how much the very fact that we were a part of this wave of Europeans and Americans that want to climb the mountain is changing the mountain, and is changing the lives of the people that live at the base of the mountain. So all of this, if you can see, I put one number, one date up here. There's a whole story here of relationships and love and passion and faith and ironies and complexities and struggles and all this stuff. And all of that leads to what Kibo is. And I haven't even told you much yet what Kibo is. I'm spending a little more time on this front end. One of the challenges we have at Kibo, as I'll talk about here in a minute, I know you talk about things like this in this class. When we ask donors to give to Kibo, it's hard to communicate all of this. And one of the things that we're asking donors to do is we're not simply asking donors to give money for some new method that we found for how to do development in Africa or some formula that we think will work for poverty. We're actually asking donors to be a part of relationships. We're asking them to participate with us, in relationship with us and in relationship with Ugandans and with East Africans in a way that is messy, but is rich and rewarding too. So a whole lot there with 1998. Second number there, and I won't spend as much time on each segment of this. But $600,000 is a dollar amount. And $600,000 is our annual budget now. And you can look at some of the details on that on our website and some of our materials, but what started as a couple conversations in 1998 on a mountain has now grown into a nonprofit organization in 2017 that has an operating budget of $600,000. And there are details behind that. There are projects that I'll be telling you some about, and the rest, kind of different forms of mission statements that are made and all of that. But the main thing I want to say right now takes us down to this third number, and that's number 22. And if you look at the back of the handout that Zach gave you, 22 is the number of employees that Kibo now has, and so a lot of that $600,000 supports these employees and the projects that they do and that they implement. The thing I want to tell you about these 22 employees, I want to tell you a couple things about them. 4 of them are Americans. They live in the United States, and they kind of operate and keep the American side of Kibo going. Zach is actually our newest employee. He's one of those 4. 18 of them are Ugandans, or at least East Africans, Ugandan and Kenyans. And the reason that's important to me to bring out, I mean, we're still a small operation, we're still kind of grassroots, and as I'll be sharing with you, but the thing that's important about that is when you hear me say we, when I use the term we to talk about Kibo, and I say we at Kibo, we do this and we do that, what I'm really talking about are those 18 that live in East Africa. The we are the faces that you see there, and I'm privileged to be a participating part of that. But the real magic of Kibo, there's something remarkable happening with Kibo, and it's happening on the ground in East Africa, and it's happening through the work and the integrity and the passion of our 18 employees there, and all the communities and all the networks of people in East Africa and Uganda that they work with. And that's important. And the other piece that's important about that with these 18 is not only do they do the work, but they develop the work. And I want to make a really clear point of this, because if you want to understand Kibo, this is important for us. Kibo is not an American organization that employs 18 people to do the work that we think needs to be done in East Africa. That's not what Kibo is. Those 18 people in East Africa not only implement and do the work, they shape the vision statements for Kibo. They form the committees, and we work with them as well as partners, but they're the ones that shape the vision. They have the primary sources, the primary resources. They have the local knowledge. And all of that goes back to not just a way that Kibo operates, but it goes back to a core conviction of Kibo, and you're going to hear this come out several other times in the next 15 minutes or so. Core convictions of Kibo is that the problems of poverty and injustice in East Africa need local solutions. Those are global problems, but they need local solutions. And so what Kibo is not. Kibo is not a conviction that we have found some formula or some mechanical method that works, and because it works in India or because it works in some other continent somewhere, that we can bring it like a cookie cutter and impose it on East Africa. That's how a lot of the development world has tended to operate. Let's find the right method and then let's start applying it everywhere. A lot of good work and a lot of good people behind those projects, but if you want to understand Kibo, that's not what Kibo is. Kibo works from the conviction that the best solutions, the deepest solutions, the most long-term solutions to poverty and injustice are going to come from local resources, local ingenuity, local knowledges. And so those 18 employees represent all of that. one way to, in fact, Zach and I were talking about this the other day, and one of the terms that I know he likes to use, one way to think about that is Kibo works from kind of an assets-based development model. We start not by assuming, and listen to this, and all of this is wrapped up in those 18 that are part of this 22. We start by assuming not that the Ugandans that live in the villages that we work with have a deficiency that we need to fill. In other words, we don't start from a position of, or from an assumption of their deficiency. They lack something, we have something, so we need to give it to them and then they'll be better off. That's not how we operate. We operate rather starting with the conviction that they have the assets, they have the resources, they have the knowledges, they have what they need to address the problems. They have some challenges for realizing their own potentials, and our partnership helps in bringing that out. But this is truly an empowering effort. Not to give them something that they need and that we have, but to help initiate a process that brings to the surface their own potentials and their own abilities, and to empower them and to give them the dignity of their own solutions. And so, all of that to say, I just wrote it like this on my sheet here. Kibo is not Americans providing the know-how and the money, and Africans executing a plan that was developed in DC or LA. And Kibo, they have the know-how, they develop the plans, and we help facilitate that. But the American side also is not hands-off. And this is where the logic and the balance of Kibo gets complicated but also rich. Kibo is also not, oh, just let the Ugandans do whatever they want, we'll just sit back here and foot the bill. Just throw money at them. That's not what we do either. The metaphor that I like to use in our partnership, and Kibo, if nothing else, Kibo is a partnership to address problems of poverty and injustice in East Africa. The metaphor I like to use, if there are any dancers in here, is when you think of most couple dancing, if you dance as a couple, one of the partners in that couple needs to be the lead. And if one isn't leading and the other one following, you start stepping on each other's feet and you start falling over and it gets embarrassing. But for a couple's dance to work, for it to flow, for the magic to happen, someone needs to be in the lead and someone needs to be following. Neither of the partners are sitting on the couch or sitting on the sidelines. They're both fully engaged. In Kibo, we have partners. We have American partners and we have Ugandan partners or East African partners in our dance together as we pursue sustainable development. The Ugandans are in the lead. The Africans are in the lead. The Americans are dancing and we're involved, but we follow. And one of the things I want to get you guys to think and wrestle with us a little bit is the challenge that sometimes creates as we try to find donors. We have a lot of people. Kibo is doing some remarkable things, and we have some exciting stuff happening in East Africa, and it's attracted a lot of attention. People are watching, and they're seeing that we're able to do things in communities that big organizations and other organizations have tried and can't do. And so they want to come to us, but as soon as they do, we're starting to talk about this partnership where we are in submission. And especially American donors sometimes have a hard time with that. We want to put our money down, and we want to make sure our money is well invested, and we're confident, and we have answers, and we want to see results, and we want to make sure if I give you my money, I want you to give me these results, and I would like to invest in this project, I'd like you to do it this way as I throw a marker at you. And all of that is good. There's some good attributes in those cultural qualities. But part of what Kibo asks donors to do is to invest in relationships and submit to African logic and to African methodology and to African knowledges and assets and to African ways of doing things that sometimes don't meet American criteria. For those that are interested in that, there's a rich and effective resource that's happening here. For those that can't do that and want to have more control, then we invite them to look at some other good works that maybe work from a different method.